It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning. It's 8 a.m. here on my side, so it's a little earlier. And Jennifer, that was a really interesting presentation, learned lots. And yeah, so I want to talk to you about the ecosystems that have been hiding in the deep in the Galapagos Marine Reserve and some really exciting things that we've discovered. And yeah, so I'm a marine ecologist, part of the Seamount Research Project at the Charles Darwin Research Station, which is a non-profit NGO. And I'm also a PhD candidate at the University of British Columbia right now. And I'm giving this talk from Vancouver, Canada. And I just want to acknowledge that I'm giving this talk from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nation. And let's see if I can click next here. Okay, so a little bit about me. If you'd asked me probably 6 years ago if I would be doing deep sea and mesophotic research, I would have never known. I actually studied geography with a focus on freshwater ecology. Still love the freshwater ecosystems. But I graduated during an economic crisis in 2009 and got a job in marketing instead. But I got this awesome scholarship while I was living in Trinidad and Tobago, where my mom's from. And I learned to dive there, and that just opened my world to the marine world and allowed me to apply for a scholarship and a master's to study coral reefs and climate change in Canada. And after that, I applied to this dream job in the Galapagos, and I got it. I was very lucky, and I got it, and I packed all my bags, and I moved to Santa Cruz Island. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but this is the Charles Darwin Research Station where I was based, and I lived in this town here. So the Galapagos Islands actually have a small population of around 35,000 people, so not that small. And yeah, I was based here at the research station, at the Marine Research Station since 2016. And I got the chance to work on many projects supporting coral reef monitoring, a lobster fisheries project. But by 2017, I got pulled into the Seamount Deep-Sea Research Project, where I'm still a part of now, and I'll be talking about the work I've been doing there. But then in 2020, I decided to do a PhD, continuing the work that I was doing on the Seamount project, and that's what I'll be talking about. But before I get into it, I just want to give you a little bit of context. So these are can you guys see my mouse when I'm circling things?
Yes, we can see it.
Brilliant. So this is the archipelago or archipelago. And one thing I want you to notice, it's like slap bang on the equator. So it's the tropics. This is about 1,000 kilometers distance away from South America. This is Ecuador, a Spanish-speaking Latin American country. And Galapagos is a province part of Ecuador. And it has a population. And here on the right, you can see where the arrow points. This is Santa Cruz Island, where the research station was based. And the work that we do at the research station in the Marine Department is dedicated to providing critical information to the managers of the Galapagos Marine Reserve, which is this black line kind of encompasses what the reserve area is. This was at the time one of the largest reserves in the world, set in 1998. And actually this week, I don't know if any of you have seen in the news, the government of Ecuador has signed a decree to extend another 60,000 kilometers squared of this reserve, which is a big deal, but I won't get into that. You can Google that in the news and you can read lots about that, but that's very exciting. And the reason why there's so much push for protection of the marine environment here is because Galapagos has really an incredible marine ecosystem and system in general. So these are the islands and its geologic platform, and these arrows represent currents, very large currents. And what you can see here is that the islands get bathed in these warm water currents that come from the north and the southeast. And then on the west, we have these underwater deep currents that are cold, that smash into the geologic platform and rise up. So we have upwelling, really cold upwelling water that is varies between 14 to 20 degrees. And then we have the Humboldt current that on the southeast brings cold water from the Antarctic. So Galapagos is this place where a marine biologist gets so confused because you get to see tropical species next to Arctic species. So it's the only place in the world where you see a parrotfish, which is a quintessential tropical reef fish, next to a penguin. and corals and sea lions together. And part of the reason why we also have such incredible diversity is because the Galapagos has a lot of diverse habitats for so many species to have evolved here. So it has mangroves, it has coral reefs, it has rocky reefs, it has sandy beaches. And these ecosystems are pretty well understood. But then most of the reserve is actually pelagic ecosystems that are pretty deep. But these deep ecosystems are pretty interesting here because Galapagos has seamounts and lots of vertical structures because of its geological history. And these are the ecosystems that we know very little about, as you guys all know. Studying anything beyond scuba diving, easy scuba diving, 40 meters or 120 feet. Sorry, I'll be talking in meters and kilometers a lot here. So I hope you're good at converting. Just multiply times 3 to turn it into feet. And so in the Galapagos, we have this complex volcanic history, which means that the topography is very variable. There are lots of seamounts, essentially underwater mountains of many sizes, large and small, and vertical structures. And these are, we now know, since there's more deep sea research that has happened in the last 20 years, that these tend to host incredible biodiversity, important biodiversity, but we're still understanding what this looks like. And I was lucky enough to join the Seamount Project back in 2017. And I got this data set from the Ocean Exploration Trust that brought this massive ROV system. It's probably the size of a small bathroom in Vancouver. And it explored several seamounts and lava flows between 600 and 9,000 feet deep. And I was part of the team who analyzed these video sets. And it was pretty, like, for me, it was like, wow, I'm looking at stuff that no one's ever seen before. This, for example, here is a shark. It clearly is a little bit disorientated by the light because the ROVs, this is a pitch black environment and the ROV is shining lots of light so that we can see what's living down here. But this was fascinating work. None of us knew what half of these species were. Here's another example. This is a cold water coral reef at around 400 meters deep. This is a hard coral similar to those you find in shallow reefs, like in the Caribbean. Obviously slightly different. In the background, you can see lots of scorpions, and this plane is beaming with life, and it's been super exciting. I've been part of the team who looked at these videos, turned them into images, categorized them. We worked with 20 different taxonomists, and we had to do this groundwork of identifying these species from scratch and to be able to do a community study. And we published a few papers, and this has been really great work. But all of this work for me was me on a laptop analyzing videos. And one of the things that stood out was that sorry, let me give you an intro on this image here. So we're looking at here is at the top, we're looking at different distinct deep sea communities that we identified in these deep sea habitats. And the top ones are mostly coral and sponges. And what we noticed was that in the shallower areas, more complex corals were found. And this led me to think, well, we have so many shallow seamounts. We should be exploring some of the shallower ones because there's probably lots of interesting habitat there. And someone had told me that we had a contact with VideoRay, a company that makes ROVs, smaller ROVs that would be easy to bring to the Galapagos. So I jumped on a call and I met Tom Levas over a Skype conversation, and I told him, hey, would you guys be interested in coming to the Galapagos and help me explore? And I'll apply for a grant with National Geographic. And they signed up. They said, yep. And I actually got the grant, which was awesome. And VideoRay came with their team, and we managed to pull off this pilot study to explore and survey shallow seamounts using small commercial ROVs, which are the Defender and the Pro 5 at the time. And I also challenged the VideoRay team to ask them if they could install a stereo video transect system onto the ROV, which was, at the time, it seemed pretty easy. I hope that's the case, Tom. We installed this. And the reason I wanted to put this on, and I'll get into this later, was I wanted to be able to get a record do video transits where we're recording overlapping video images, because then through a special program, it allows you to get exact measurements of the size of things, because the program understands the 3D geometry of the positioning of what you're recording. And we did it in 2018. This was our first day in the field. I for the first time was leading my first expedition using ROVs. I was pretty nervous, but it was amazing to work with such an amazing team of engineers with the ROVs. And this is a glorious picture of one of our dodgier days in the sea. We realized very quickly that this boat was too small. We had problems managing the tether. So by 2 days later, we upgraded to a bigger boat, and that went really well. Now, what did we find? So many times we explored 4 seamount sites that were sites where we got coordinates from fishermen. And the first one, there wasn't a seamount there, which was very disappointing. We looked, but we couldn't find them. But then later on, we went to several sites, and we managed to get as deep as 180 meters, and we found some pretty cool some pretty cool sponge reefs, and that was really cool. Here on the right, you can see we noticed that a lot of red crustless coralline algae were down there, which was really interesting for me to see that we still have photosynthetic organisms photosynthesizing at this depth with this little light. And most importantly, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do the study, I got to identify that there were many commercial fish species that are fish species that are important to the local fishing community that were inhabiting these rocky sponge reefs that we were finding. So that was really interesting. But the most amazing find that we had was on the last day, of course. And I don't know if any of you can guess what we're looking at here. And we were as perplexed as the ROV is going down and it's landing on the summit of one of the seamounts. We realized that what we're looking at here is, let me get to the next slide, is a kelp forest. And yeah, I was totally shocked. I couldn't even say the word kelp at the moment, because it was the last thing that was on my mind. I was like, kale, what is this? And then one of the persons in the VideoRay team was like, is this kelp? And I'm like, yes. And yeah, beautiful, lush kelp. Football fields of it. This is the view from the stereo video camera. So you see that it has slightly, it doesn't have a fisheye view, and it doesn't have a red filter. Yeah, we were just gobsmacked when we found this. And why is this so exciting, and what is kelp anyway? So kelp are large brown seaweeds or macroalgae. They grow incredibly fast. They are among the most productive ecosystems on Earth. They are really important for marine biodiversity. They provide shelter, foraging grounds, food sources for other species. And what's interesting to note, though, is that kelp need cold water, nutrients, and light, which is why they're generally distributed in the colder parts on the higher latitudes of the world. And in the coastal zones, because they need light, so they can't be too deep. And they're really important. We're now finding out that they're actually also really important to us, not only in providing fisheries and supporting marine biodiversity, but also as carbon sinks. However, and sadly, they're rapidly declining because of the warming of the oceans, as they need warm water. And so it's really exciting to find that we have this tropical mesophotic kelp forest in the Galapagos. And I was pretty excited because I had actually heard about Galapagos, famous for being home to one of the few known tropical kelp forests. And I knew about this when I learned about this when I arrived in the Galapagos. But this species is a bit of a mysterious species, because it had not been seen since, it's rarely been seen since the 1980s, because since El Nino event, it was believed to almost have gone extinct. And in 2007 was the last sighting someone saw it in the west coast of the island, but no one that I met had ever seen this kelp. So I was so happy when I realized that, wow, on the seamount is this kelp forest of this rare endangered kelp species of the Galapagos. But when we analyzed the videos a little bit closer that evening with the VideoRay team, we realized it was even the same species. Like, it looks pretty different, right? So amazingly enough, the team said we can actually install a grabber or a robotic arm on the ROV and grab you some samples. So I had to run around like a crazy lady and with the Galapagos in the Galapagos National Park to get a permit, because I did not have a permit to grab a sample. But we got the permit. We got funding for one more boat, to hire a boat to go out there one more day, and we got 2 samples. This is us on our heroic after completing our heroic mission. This makes me smile so much. I was so happy that day. And we also did a bunch of transects, which I'm analyzing to this day still, because there's so much information in these, and I'll tell you more about that in a second. But yeah, so we got the sample, and for sure it looks very different. Unfortunately, science takes a long time for us to actually confirm 100% that it's something different. But this pushed me to realize that I want to study a lot more. I want to find out a lot more about this kelp system, and kind of changed my life a little bit, because I was very scared to do a PhD, but I decided, screw it, I'm going to do it. So I decided to apply for a PhD. And some of the main questions that I want to find answer is the Galapagos home to 2 species of kelp? If so, what species is this? What are the characteristics of these kelp forests and the associated biodiversity? And are these kelp forests like the last patches for the region, or are there actually a lot more out there? And are they just hiding in the deep where it's colder, and these cold spaces are actually acting as thermal refuge for kelp communities? And more importantly, could these kelp communities actually be important refugia, climate change refugia, during warming events like El Nino? And since our field campaign with VideoRay, I put out a few blogs about the kelp discovery. I got these unique opportunities to collect more data. So a tech diving team actually came to do a movie in the Galapagos, and they decided to help us out by grabbing more samples, which was really important to do the description of the species. And we set out some sensors to monitor temperature and light. I also got to collect some water samples. And even more unique opportunity was Sylvia Earle, who's a famous marine biologist. She's actually a botanist by training, but now she's more of an advocate for the ocean. She loves the Galapagos, and when she heard about our discovery, she got in touch with me and said, why don't you join us on our Mission Blue expedition? We're bringing a submarine, so you can go and look up the kelp forest in the submarine. And I am obviously forever grateful for this incredible experience. And I got to see the kelp forest myself. I got to be down there, and it's pretty amazing. It's just this massive football field of kelp forest. And we got more samples as well. And some of our findings so far, but this is work in progress. And the big question is this a new species of kelp to the Galapagos? And we've done the morphological inspection, and we've done the phylogenetic sequencing of the species. And from the morphological inspection, we're pretty sure this is a species that belongs to the genus Essenia, which is also known as a sea palm. And these are the juvenile, at the top you can see these are the juvenile samples of the species. And the lower down, these are the adult. And what we can say is yes, question mark, because we can't be for sure yet, but it looks like it is certainly very different to Essenia galapagensis, so the other kelp that we know exists in the Galapagos. However, there is no genetic sequences that has been done for this species or another potential similar species called Essenia cockeri. So we cannot do a genetic comparison with these two. And until we don't do that, we cannot determine for sure if this is a new species. But we did compare it to Eisenia arborea, which is a very similar looking kelp species that you find actually here in Vancouver and California and Baja California and Mexico. And genetically, it's very similar, but it's different. So it's different enough. So this is giving us a sign that this is likely a new species to science, which is very, very exciting. And we are putting out this publication and all of this data very soon. I'm hoping to submit this paper by the end of this month. In terms of the characterizing of the kelp forest, so from all the surveys that I was able to do with VideoRay and subsequent opportunities with the divers and the sub, I know now that the kelp forest extends from about 47 to 67 meters deep. So it is a mesophotic kelp system for sure. And mesophotic, I've been throwing around this word. The photic zone is the light zone, which tends to be from 0 to 40 meters deep. And the mesophotic zone is somewhere between 35 to 40 meters up until 200. And it's that zone where you still have some light, but not a lot of light. So that's what I've been calling. That's what I mean by the mesophotic zone. And when we put out temperature loggers down there, we found that the temperatures are between 15 to 16 degrees. Now, my temperature loggers were only set during the cold season, which is during July and August. And what we did find was that temperatures are colder by 4 degrees than at the surface, which is important because that means that there is this thermal stratification that the kelp forest is probably taking advantage, and it allows this cold water species to exist down there. And we also found that it grows with so little light, like 1.4 photons of UMOLs per meter square per second, which in reference at the surface, we get like 1,000 or 2,000 during the day. So my light measurements were only for the cold season, which is when visibility is the worst. So it's really important that we monitor light again during the warm season when the system is more nutrient poor and light is probably better. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to understand when these kelp are actually photosynthesizing the most. These are many questions. And then from the surveys, I've also found that we still have to do a lot more surveys, but the fish species that we found are very similar to those of, I recognized and I was able to ID them all. And they're very similar to those found on shallow ecosystems. So on the shallow reefs and the mangroves. So that's interesting because the fact that this fish species are overlapping means that this mesophotic system has the potential to act as a refuge as ecosystem for when we're having heat waves or climate change impacts in the shallower ecosystem. So that's important knowledge to understand. And with the stereo video transects that we conducted, and this is still work in progress that I'm working on now, I'm trying to figure out a good protocol. This is the first time that someone is doing this, to my knowledge. I'm using a stereo video method to quantify the population size distribution frequency. So I'm trying to get like an understanding of the exact size of the population of kelps using this program that allows me to, through them using stereo video, it allows me to measure the exact size of things. So this is an example here. The red line, the one red line here is meant to represent a quadrat. And then the other line is me taking measurements of the stike, which is the stem of the kelp. And so far, what we found is that the density of the kelp forest ranges from 5 to 7 individuals per meter squared. And this is density comparable to kelp forests in other parts of the world. And it tends to be dominated by mature kelp adults. But we also found the presence of lots of juveniles, which means that there's recruitment. So far it shows that we have a healthy kelp forest. So I know I'm running over time here, so I'll wrap this up really quickly. But my next steps, and this is the major study for my PhD, is to go back to the Galapagos. I want to search for more kelp forest sites so I can understand the distribution and the abundance of these kelp forests, which is critical information for the Galapagos National Park. And I want to go back use ROV with a stereo video system again. And this time, at the time we were doing ad hoc transects, but this time I want to do proper systematic transects, and sample more kelps. I want to monitor the physical environment hopefully over 6-month time period, so I can get a proper understanding of what is going on down here. And I want to repeat these surveys over the warm and cold season. So wish me luck. I have a lot of field work to plan for, and I'm hoping that VideoRay wants to come and join me again on my mission down here. And why does this research matter? Well, up until this point, we knew nothing almost about kelps, except that in the Galapagos, except that they're these mysterious species that no one really got to see very much. So this research is going to provide critical baseline for the managers of the Galapagos Marine Reserve, and identifying climate change refugia, and in this case in deeper zones, is critical research and it's a critical research and conservation priority, locally and globally. And I think one of the cool things about this project is that I'm providing an example, at least for this part of the world where we haven't been doing this a lot, is using novel technologies and methods to collect data in largely understudied mesophotic habitats. And the fact that we discovered a huge and such an important kelp forest at only a few meters beyond scuba diving limits, so at 50 meters, just goes to show how little we know about what's in the oceans in these deeper zones. So I'm really excited about the future of marine biology, because with tools like ROVs like those from VideoRay, I think we are actually gonna fully understand what all the amazing biodiversity that we yet have to discover that is in the ocean. And I'm happy to take questions, though I know I'm over time here. And I just want to thank all the collaborators and who made this work happen.
Thanks so much, Salome. We have time for a few questions. If you have any questions, you can type them into the chat window. I have a question for you, Salome. Yeah. What was the program that you used for the kelp measurements?
Yeah, this is called Event Measure. Yeah, it's run by they're called CGIS. It's actually a product that came out probably a decade ago by marine researchers from Australia. I can send you guys the link in the chat in a minute if you guys want.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah. I have another question too. You also mentioned that El Nino threatened a particular species of kelp.
Yeah.
Are there other threats to the Galapagos and the species that inhabit them?
Yeah. So yeah, El Nino and these heat waves is a massive threat, but we definitely have illegal fishing that happens in the Galapagos. So the marine reserve is, let me just see if I can get back that slide. But yeah, the marine reserve is massive, and right now the Galapagos National Park only has, I believe, 2 patrol ships, and around the marine reserve, there is, if we were to go onto, I think it's I can't remember the name of the program, but you can go on a program and see all the fishing vessels that are in the world. You will see that there's like dots all around the Galapagos Marine Reserve where industrial fishing boats are fishing, because there's so much overflow from the huge amount of fish like tuna, schools of tuna, and snappers and groupers that are swimming in and out of the reserve. And often these illegally cross the marine reserve, and they're especially targeting sharks. That's one of our other impacts. And then we also have a local legal artisanal fishery, and even though they're managed, they are certainly what we call fishing down the food web. So in the coastal fisheries are definitely being impacted, because fishermen tend to go to the closest sites first and fish everything that is newly available. And then as the fish get smaller and lesser, they move out to new zones. So what we have is like localized impact of fishing down the deep-sea. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. We have another question here. Would you recommend the 3D setup on that ROV for pelagic fish surveys?
Yes, I would. Thanks for the question, Sharif. Yeah, I would, and I can put you in touch with the group who's actually testing this and doing this. So they are in Australia. This is the Ewan Harvey, and he's at Curtin University, and he's one of my collaborators. They are actually at the moment publishing papers and showing how the use of ROVs and with stereo video, and they're putting out standardized protocols and methods to help other people replicate these methods. So yes, I would say. You're welcome.
Awesome, thank you. So if that's it for questions, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you again, Salome. It's really amazing stuff that you're doing, and we wish you luck in the future.
Yay, I need it. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for the invitation. Shall I, I'll mute here and I'll let you guys wrap with that.
All right, great. Yeah, so we're going to leave the chat window open just for maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, just in case there's some extra questions that come in that we didn't get to. And maybe we can answer them in the chat window. If not, you can contact support at VideoRay.com with any questions. Just a few messages before we sign out. You can come see VideoRay at the SHOT Show in Las Vegas, Nevada, going on now until tomorrow. The Oceanology International Show in London, March 15th to the 17th, and the OTC Show in Houston, Texas, May 2nd to the 5th. And if you haven't seen it already, VideoRay launched our new website. You can visit the website at www.videoray.com, where we have our updated training schedule for 2022, in addition to new content and updated product information. I want to thank you all for participating, and a huge thank you to the presenters. If you have questions regarding training or support for VideoRay, you can contact support at videoray.com, or any questions regarding sales can be answered at sales@videoray.com. Keep an eye out for next month's newsletter, which will provide more information on next month's Insights event. We'll keep teams open for a few minutes here for any additional questions. And thank you all again, and look forward to seeing you February 17th for next month's Insights event. Thank you.